Well, the subject is direct engagement leadership. We've got a serious situation today, one that's rather ironic. For such a connected world, we're becoming disengaged, and that leads to some real problems in the workplace. Why is this issue so important today? What's the research that tells us why it's important and what to do about it? There are changes that we're seeing in how behavior works today. Certainly the technological stuff that we're experiencing, the dramatic shift in the way we communicate, is having an impact. And it's also affecting the way we need to respond. There's a sharpening and focusing of the techniques we must use. It isn't that everything we learned in the past is out the window, quite the opposite, but it is true that there's a greater efficiency required and a greater specificity in the issues we tackle, a real priority of things that must occur first. And so we're going to talk about that. There is a way to test the level of engagement in your organization, and it's vital, as we'll see in the research, to do so. And we'll actually go through a mini version of this just to get a feel for it. And then we're going to talk about the specific skill set, what's involved, and I'd like to open this up so we can have some questions shortly on. We'd also like to invite you to some of the activities we're pursuing in the direct engagement arena. Some public seminars opening in Chicago and Washington, and some specific webinars that we'll be offering very shortly. Well, let's jump in. Why is direct engagement so important? Well, leadership is our guidance system. Whether we like it or not, we're not a Boeing 787 cruiser where 90% plus of what takes place in what one might call leadership decisions is actually programmed into software. So from takeoff to landing, the 90% of what happens can actually be carried out through a computerized cybernetic guidance system in the plane. We're not at that point in the average workplace, and it actually frees the pilots up to deal with those things that are certainly more testing from a human point of view. Without leadership at the center of the society, it can't hold together. Optimism, hope declines, and survival is threatened. And we've seen this very clearly in the recent years. I mean, what happened in our economy worldwide was due to the fact that leaders were disengaged. Whether that was the case because of technology or was the case because of bad practice, bad decisions, or overt and conscious manipulation. Matter of fact, all of those are involved, and at the center of it was a conscious and unconscious absence of engagement. People didn't want to know, and not me, I didn't do it while I checked my Swiss bank account. Engagement is at the heart of everything we're experiencing today, and all we have to do is look at the Euro conference of the past couple of weeks to see that fact. Therefore, as Dick Beckhard, an old teacher, a wonderful man, said, a leader must therefore become a master of behavior, a sensei of human conduct. And that, I think, is something we've been not focusing on explicitly, that it is the individual leader that has to have skills development in the engagement behavioral forum. If the leader doesn't have those skills, then we all suffer as a consequence. Things fall apart. One of the most interesting things of the research we're sharing is that last fall, as sort of putting a little icing on the cake here to make sure we understood what the most recent orientation of the workforce was in our society, we did an assessment, your standard kind of Gallup kind of assessment, phone survey, and we looked at 1,742 employees and 1,253 leaders. And because it were that numbers, because we needed to look at healthcare, business, and public service, what we found was a very interesting list of predictors of problems. Certainly there was fear. And underlying most people's presence in the workplace, over 70% of people actually feared for their job, for the circumstances that could affect their situation. And those who weren't afraid of it, I mean, legitimate fear beyond just mere fear, anxiety. Colleagues said, I have some colleagues who aren't afraid of what might happen, and to them I say, wake up. And that was really quite interesting. Cynicism is at a very high level, and I don't think that's a surprise to any of us. An interesting problem that arose was on-the-job attention deficit. We see this increasingly, and part of it has to do with flitting. We are being conditioned to be ADD, and the problem is we're not concentrating well enough on work and getting it done, and so we're seeing that kind of behavior on the job. People aren't in themselves engaged in their work sufficiently to concentrate, and of course that's terrible inefficiency because people have to restart and everything else as a result of turning away from one task to another and back and forth, and they sort of fibrillate intellectually. Presenteeism, I love that term. You're there, but you're not. So people show up, but they're distracted, and the ADD contributes to that. People are now afraid very much, for everybody who wondered about relationship commitment phobia in the personal level. Well, we're seeing that in more extreme cases in the workplace, of course. A thing that contributes to all of this is paradox overload. Watching one department grow while the other one's cut. Watching one plant close or one line of products being eliminated while another grows. And so this kind of paradox is a tough thing to understand. And people are understanding there's not much benefit in getting angry over it, but the fact that they can't get angry and they can't get satisfaction through that anger is itself contributes to cynicism, fear, and stress. And what we will have as a result of all of this is a decline in the most important human characteristic that explains evolution, and that is reciprocal altruism. I do this for you, and you do this for me, and we together build cooperative links and learn how to reciprocate, and that strengthens the human network, which is the key to survival and evolution. We're seeing a decline in that element, and one of the key predictors of that is that our managers are often less present in the workplace, less engaged. The result of that is we're seeing a loss of focus strategically and operationally, and it starts, well, who knows where it starts? A chicken and egg kind of thing. It can start operationally and contaminate the strategic in businesses like healthcare and service businesses in various consulting and personal service ends of things, as well as in a rapid arena of high-tech, rapidly changing arena of high-tech. As one level shifts, the average work focus is lost, it contaminates the strategic ability to think and move forward, and vice versa. Productivity, quality, and safety in healthcare is a tremendous indicator. Very clear indications of ADD and paradox complexity has to do with the fact that when you look at infection control, whether microbial kinds of bugs are not cleaned effectively on beds and sidebars on beds, which are noted as sources for strep and particularly C. difficile. These kinds of things are now understood to be a function of people losing sight of their core responsibility and losing their focus and their ADD. on the job. Shirley Rook, an extraordinary leader in nursing, and everyone in all businesses needs to know this. This is really quite fascinating. Shirley is finding that in her work with nurses on the floor, that she is taking them into patient's room, sitting them there, and teaching them, literally teaching them, that every day you have to personally engage your patient in a direct conversation, and using that as a way to get attention on the units, and using that technique also with managers. As a result of all of this, you see, of course, profitability issues and market decline. In their studies, no question, when people start losing money and start losing customers, it is directly related to engagement issues. The research on this is very extensive. Many of you attending today have been with us through the research process and know of it and have been very helpful. And I thank you for that. We know as a result of that effort, which we initiated a new cycle of it in 2007 and have been following that through intensely through 2011. And what we know is that there are major behavioral differences that explain much of the success that is occurring where it occurs. Now, a Facebook phenomenon is one thing. And it's a technological breakthrough. But you can't help but look at an apple and see that there is a tremendous level of engagement. Even conflict itself isn't a bad thing as long as it represents positive engagement. And there's, as we all know in reading about Steve Jobs' background and skills, but we also see in places like Microsoft where Ballmer is creating a much more engaged environment. Resurgence in established organizations like GE, where Jeff Immelt is practicing that. And you see it up and down the line where we're seeing success, a re-engaged leadership. Our particular data, there are 39% of the 982 were healthcare, 6% manufacturing, and 55% general service. We've broken out healthcare. It's a major sector. We all learn so much from it. But needless to say, we have to distinguish certain environments in order to understand more specifically what takes place. This particular statistical representation is important because it shows statistically a clear differentiation in the upper right side from the lower left. What we're seeing is that there is a significant difference between environments that are the ones on the right and the upper right are more profitable than the ones on the left. And why? Well, the predictors that emerge most clearly, I'm sure it has to do with some strategic position, product currency, and everything else. That isn't the surprise. What is the surprise is that we can actually identify specific behaviors that contribute to profitability, that contribute to safety, and we don't have to play games. Those folks who in HR and working in the leadership field, you need to know and feel confident when you say that being present is critically important for leadership, that encouraging to solve problems, and it's how you do it, of course, that's so critical, but you have to be able to do it, that making sure coworkers are able to engage in on-the-job problem solving, priorities are clear, that this contributes to profitability. It holds the place together. And for less profitable organizations, that when top performers are not emphasized, the place goes down. I can't emphasize this enough. We seem to be reticent to talk about achievement in our society, and there are those among us who are helping to build our society, not necessarily being recognized financially, but they are there and they are holding things together, and we need to retain them. And where customer focus is not a high priority, the organization certainly loses its center, its purpose, and becomes an unguided missile. We know We know from this, therefore, that engagement behavioral differences clearly exist between successful and less successful organizations. And what became our purpose was to understand what those are. And they are, in terms of predicting effective quality and profits, a direct engagement, which we are going to define more clearly in a moment, is key, and it must be delivered and wrapped within the framework of customer reciprocity. A very interesting notion. The idea is, before we look at reciprocity to each other, it's not whether the manager is giving to the employee and the employee therefore has a contract with the manager and gives back. It's important, but it is not as important for profitability and quality as the manager and the employee both having a contract with the customer. It is the customer who gives us the business, maybe the wrong way sometimes, but gives us the business, drives our financial success, and it is the customer who gets back from us a commitment in service. And unless that is the dominant focus of reciprocity, an organization declines. Fascinating, because the old notion that it's just me, a manager and the employee, and that's where we have to make our commitment, that doesn't work. It didn't work at General Motors with the UAW, where they made commitments back and forth for years and years, and they ignored the customer, and look what the heck happened. And now it's becoming more clear all the time. This is particularly pertinent because so much of our telemarketing and everything else it leads to disconnects with our customers. Or in the healthcare setting where things are moving so quickly and patients are so sick that they come and go still sick. And therefore, our connections with them may not be strong enough. And the impact on us may not be clear enough for us to really feel a sense of reciprocity with them. It shows up. As they always say, things roll downhill, and when it comes to stress and anger in a healthcare environment or in a business, it is the patient or the customer who receives that first and suffers from the disengagement that occurs. Engagement is therefore, when you put it all together, a convergence. It's a convergence of feeling a sense of responsibility for the customer, a reciprocity that follows that responsibility. I will do this. I recognize my responsibility. I feel reciprocity for what the customer brings to my life and my organization, and I develop mastery as a result of that. Now let's take a quick test. I mean, at this point, if we were live, we'd all stand up and turn around because we probably, given the pace of everything in today's life, we need every 10 or 13 minutes just to stand up and turn around and shake things out. And that might not be a bad idea. But I'm going to walk you through a quick test of your organization. Ask yourself, look at the scale here. Is your organization at an achievement level where it's starting to accomplish things? Does it have partnership in the organization where people actually work with each other, not just as friends, but as engaged people who share information and do things together and say, you do this and I do that? Is there a sense of commitment that means that the partnership goes beyond the moment, beyond the day, and that there's a sense I'll be there for you? Is it hopeful? Optimism grows out of achievement, partnership, and commitment. Serious optimism, not this, just superficial, happy kind of stuff. But optimism is a function, and hope is a function of feeling the achievement, partnership, and commitment, and people assume responsibility when they feel hope. Why would you assume responsibility if there's no hope? But when I feel hope for myself and for my team and for my organization, I want to be counted and I am responsible. Conversely, when I'm not at an achievement level, I'm sort of fence-sitting. I haven't really decided to do anything. I'm avoiding people when I don't want partnership. I actually develop hostility when I don't feel commitment. And contempt grows when I feel negativity and defeatism, and that fuels irresponsibility. Pick a number. Pick a number. Hold that number in your head. Where are you, on the plus or the negative? Now, we're not going to have time to go into great detail, but you can also pick a person in your mind. Pick a person who personifies that number. Have you got a person? Okay. Take that person and see if they are working primarily in one of three paths of work that we have in organizations. When we look at the work we do, we're usually doing something that fulfills things, changing or changing things or improving things, the innovation path, or we're managing and organizing. And with that, we then usually can find ourselves behaviorally, or find the person you're talking about and thinking about on this grid. This is something we've developed over these past 3 and 4 years. Started early with the book Talent IQ and our research in that area, and was confirmed through this last 3 years of research, where we started to understand the need to be very concrete and specific using common sense language. So here you have a number, you have a person. Are these people, or is this person, take for example in the service column, a benefactor, an empathizer, an engager, a seeker, a knowledge leader, an empowerer, a discoverer, a problem solver. And when you move up that ladder, all those 3 paths, you become a hero when you hit the top. And that is somebody who has found something important, brought it back, and shared it with others, and made a significant advancement in our organization. Or is this person a procrastinator, martyr, gossip, manipulator, backstabber, narcissist, a deer in the headlights, a black hole where you give, and get nothing out, a fatalist, and then somebody who actually takes themselves and others down with them. And in the management side, a stonewaller, a curmudgeon, or a bully, bomber, or predator. Recently, we have a program where we're dealing with bully because there is bullying and extreme behavior, because there's an increase in the incidence of that behavior throughout the country, and it represents a problem that has to be dealt with. And the bully problem and beyond, -3 and beyond, it increases directly in proportion to an engagement deficit. Where leadership is not engaged, that behavior increases, if no ifs, ands, or buts. So it is also, engagement is the key to turning that kind of an environment around. It needs some specific skills when we get to the more extreme behaviors. But you can now place that person there. What I'm going to be advising is, in the research on engagement, what we found was that leaders didn't do just this global assessment. They actually took the global assessment and were able to translate it into specifically what people did and what behavior they manifested. We were astonished at how precise people were getting. The most effective leaders were getting to be virtuosos of human behavior, senseis of the human behavior. And we've learned much more detail. We've gotten much more specific than 10 or 20 years ago. We would learn more generalized information and weren't as concrete. Well, that's not good enough for today. That's not good enough anymore. Now, what do we do with this information when we know the global stage of engagement, the specific behavioral challenges, and the characteristics of each challenge? We understand from that what the consequences for the whole organization will be by looking at the global engagement curve. Back to Shirley's observation on a nursing unit, when that nurse does not engage that patient, It's the consequence, likely, of managers not engaging employees. And it goes up the ladder all the way to a CEO. And when that engagement is not good, you develop an anchor of negativity and despair and cynicism. When it is good, hope, responsibility, profitability, quality increase. It comes down to the connecting tissue in human organizations, and that is the process of engagement. Let's take a look now at what it all comes down to in terms of key skills and principles. First of all, the interesting part is what guides this behavior. Not a complex set of things, not a complex mission statement, if you will, or a complex vision statement. It basically could be summarized by saying, for the customer, in the provision of what we do, we will be present. We will be there with the customer. We will be present with the customer. And how important that is to make that presence felt. Look at what Amazon.com is trying to do to make that presence felt electronically and digitally. I mean, it's quite a miracle to make that work. And what's happening also with those outfits and all of them is when, God forbid, you can't get to a human being in under 5 steps because everybody's starting to rebel against the fact that there isn't someone there who will be present with them. We're all feeling the absence of presence in our lives. And we will take the initiative for that customer to be present, and we will lead through customer questions. We will find out what's going on with that customer. We won't just tell them to do this, to listen to the menu again on the voicemail, and we are engaged to lead. And the same thing with a patient or with a client in a legal firm. We will build responsibility among ourselves, but that in turn stimulates it with our customers. Our customers become more responsible when we do, and that leads us to achieving reciprocity with our customers. Those 3 principles are what we found guided businesses, and one of the places you see this most remarkably, the place, in fact, I'll say, well, I won't say the place, but is in the entrepreneurial setting. When people start their own businesses, their engagement skills have to be of the highest order. The risk of not having superb engagement skills as an owner are really keen. Now, how do you do that? Here we go again. The clarification from this research was immense. We found that people there was a very cogent list of the high priority skills a leader must have. We often teach in leadership a variety of things. There are 100 different things we can teach people. And I guess all of us who are in this field, who have served as leaders and who have been in the field of trying to help leaders grow and develop, as I look back over 35, 40 years, I think the field has been fraught with the latest, the newest thing all the time. Oh, learn this new skill, learn this skill. And we tend to focus on skills without really doing research to justify the investment of effort. Well, what we learn from this research is not only what the highest priorities are for producing profitability, quality, and so forth, but the nuanced scripts and strategies that the most effective leaders use. So it makes things stand on their head a bit. Some things work and some things don't. Certain approaches to certain specific functions work and others do not. Let's talk about, for example, putting the right person in the right place. How do you do that? Well, you have to know who they are. You have to know their talents. And if you inherit a team, you have to go through as a manager and put together who they are. How do you do that? It's a very specific process of interviewing that each manager must have with the people they supervise. Now, some of you actually will have, or some of our frontline managers will have, a broad span of control and could even have 50, 60 or more people. Well, that you can't influence all of those, but there are 8 to 13 people that every manager has to employ and delegate to and share authority with in order to accomplish anything. And those people you must know intimately and know that they're in the right place at the right time. And how to do that is a specific set of skills. You have to build connections that hold. Well, we do have wonderful advances in neuroscience. What we saw out in the field was very practical application. It's as if people had read the latest findings on things, although they were just superb and had developed superb skills. And intriguingly, from a variety of personality types, it wasn't so much where you started as a personality as it was pursuing a path of developing what we call the multi-path set of connection skills, so that you really could read what was happening to that other person and how to tune in and how to connect. Aligning energy with responsibility is vital. That's all we really have in life, is when we're alive, we have energy, and we have some time. And if that isn't aligned with our core responsibilities, we're in huge trouble. Productivity goes through the floor. It's the single greatest issue in terms of the use of our intellectual, physical, financial resources in the workplace, is the alignment of energy with responsibility. And it must be done on a continuous basis. It's never quite fixed. And there's a very effective and short script, which we watched the successful managers who are in so many different settings, but they all seem to come at this from a certain specific problem-solving approach and a certain set of specific questions. We also found that it wasn't getting a win-win for shift assignments or for a contract negotiation or for a vendor supplier, a vendor provider kind of relationship. It was achieving consensus. I think what we learned was a reinforcement of the lessons from the 20, 30 years where we saw in the automobile industry and elsewhere, where negotiations were driven by the notions of win-win or win-lose, but win-win. You win and I win. Well, what happened was that the other members of the role set who were really most important, the customers, weren't even in the conversation. And what we found out is my winning and your winning isn't the issue. The issue is whether it solves a problem, whether we can reach consensus on what's involved for the customer.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
In day-to-day operations or in very sophisticated negotiations, but it was fascinating to note that this jumped to the top list in terms of things that needed to be understood. Another thing was taking action on the.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
And
welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Ego from issue. A very conscious decision on how to approach difficult interactions. And as a result, the successful leaders dealt with conflict much more frequently, did not see it as negatively, just jumped right in and, oh, this happens to everybody. Everybody has some kind of a conflict. That's not the issue. And they employed this technique and a very specific set of, a very specific script. Overall, however, was this emphasis on creating a whole greater than the sum of its parts. And it had to do with looking at certain key issues, constantly diagnosing. Some of you are familiar with our Run to the Roar research, which is part of this, and the recognition of risk and the identification of it. At the heart was a keen sense of how to evaluate risk to create a whole greater than the sum of its parts. This skill set, combined with the tools that go with the principles, ended up creating a most efficient toolbox something that we found that now can really be provided to managers without a lot of fanfare, but with a lot of conviction. And the reason is it's evidence-based. I think all of us are humbled by the need to make sure most everything we do these days has some real evidence and isn't filled with some glib sloganeering. The consequences are just too severe to fool around with stuff that doesn't have some substance to it. It all comes together in one little graphic that engagement, responsibility, and reciprocity can drive so much and really does predict the effectiveness, the profitability, the quality in our organizations. It's both a lot simpler than anything we've seen before, and I think things we've seen in literature and so forth, and at the same time, it's more intense. What we would like to do, and the reason for this seminar today, is to invite you to join us. We will be rolling out the results of all of this now. Our first two public seminars are going to be in Chicago and Washington on March 27th and 29th. And those of you who can, we'd really invite you to join us, and you'll be receiving a flyer from us very shortly, a flyer that deals directly with this issue. And we hope you'll join us. You can't teach direct engagement unless you directly engage. We're going to try, however, to use the web to directly engage too. And so we're going to have our first two series. One will be a direct engagement webinar for leadership in nursing and clinical care, HR leaders, of course, operational leaders in healthcare. That will be announced within a week or two. And what we will try to do is to teach these specific skills through a concise series, and our focus is in the nursing and clinical area and operational area. Your nurse managers, your department heads, for many of them, this is, department heads in healthcare are very seasoned people and very capable. Yet at the same time, the engagement issue raises questions that I don't know as if they've seen in a long time. And it's very important that we all emphasize the issue of engagement in operations in environments like healthcare. We'll also be offering similar series in business, office management, and so forth, because we want to get down to where people are making those kinds of decisions every day. At the same time, we invite you to a separate webinar series where it will focus more specifically in the business, government, and public service arena. The difference largely has to do, the difference has to do with the case studies and the nuances of script application. We're learning that we must apply things specifically. We must go that extra effort to key in to what people are actually facing so that the translation of the concepts are not as difficult. We want people leaving these sessions saying, I get it, I can improve my competency 40, 50% within a day or two, and if I continue to practice, I can get it up to 60, 70, or 80% improvement. We want people to walk out of these sessions saying, I'm more effective right now. And I think we can do that now with the information we have and the specificity of it. This hasn't always been possible before. Before I continue on, we tried to make this fairly direct and to the point. I know Niles is collecting some questions from you, and I'd like to open it up right now at this point for questions. Niles?
Yes, Emmett, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, I think.
Okay, well, I was on Citrix, you're doing your presentation, so hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm connected in a different way, but we do have a question.
Go
The question
ahead.
is, it is difficult to engage when there are so many hands in the pot. Controlling aspects of our business, especially regarding legal and financial areas. How does the leadership ensure ownership at each level and allow for every employee working at the top of the license when clearly they are not paid for health care in this country, but rather sick procedural care, which doesn't require much engagement? This is going on. I think the first part of that is really an interesting issue, though, that I'm sure you'd like to address.
It seems like this particular one is focused in the healthcare area. Let me deal with this. This is it's a chain of service. And so we have different people at different points in the chain, in the flow. What I think is key in this regard is making sure, let me pull up this one here, that we align the energy with the core responsibility. Now, this is not necessarily what we call jobs descriptions, because those tend to be so rigid and abstract sometimes. What really happens is, if you're the leader, I think what you've got to do is first revisit the flow of the service and do it backwards. Start with an individual patient or client and walk it backwards and see what interactions that client had. One of the first things that may be revealed is that there are frankly too many people in that path, in that chain. You'll be amazed at how much may be affected by the complexity of the pathway. And that can come out by interviewing, going backwards and interviewing people at those different points in the chain. You can do this quickly, by the way, to get a feel for this. You can, I was brought up by my father was a vice president of methods for IBM, one of the internal consultants, and his approach to life was if it moved, it could be flowed. My daughter took violin when she was 3, and he gave her a flow chart. And Marissa, when she got up every day and began to practice, the first thing she did was bow, because she had to get ready for applause. And then the next thing and the next thing. And she did a flow. And I was brought up with that lesson that if it moves, it can flow. And I think the first thing we have to do is look at that. Now, there's a benefit to that when dealing with engagement. First of all, to produce that little flow, you will have had to engage at every step. That means everybody knows you've engaged at every step. Everybody knows you took the time out of your terribly busy schedule to spend a day engaging, following what a customer did back. The second thing they know is now it's out in the open, and it's been reviewed. The next thing they know is that this can't stay the same, because you share that chain, and you share where you've spotted confusion. And now what you do is say, we've got to resolve this. You then go back again and see if you can't sort out the responsibilities and consolidate them. And in some cases, you're going to actually remove some people from those responsibilities and not others. So that's one thing to do. However, I suspect you're also talking about a larger issue. I think you're talking about the relationships between these people. Let me say that, quite honestly, those are driven by what people do. Especially professionals who are struggling mightily with keeping their jobs. The biggest problem we have in inefficiency in environments like healthcare and in technical places where we have highly skilled, highly paid people is that our professionals tend to take on lower level skills in order to justify their jobs. The biggest source of waste in healthcare is that 44-45% of clinical people do the work of housekeepers, secretaries, and others. It isn't that they are, caught up in their own work. And when we lay people off and redesign people out of jobs, there is a de facto discrimination that sets in, and we lay off those people who aren't like us. And those people tend not to be the professionals. These are dirty secrets that I'm just tossing out that I shouldn't be just tossing out. They each deserve a great deal of sensitivity in conversation. But one of the problems, therefore, I suspect you're having, let's say you're in a law firm and you've got a bunch of lawyers here. Imagine if you're shifting the work back and forth, what that does to their sense of things. Or if you're in healthcare and you're moving it from one professional to another. In the John Dempsey Hospital, when it existed years back, we did an analysis of their 400 physicians in practice. 62% of what doctors did was not appropriate for doctors. The next year, Dr. Dr. Decker, restructured that practice, and there were some significant changes, but it grew, and those who had needed to step aside or be put aside were able to come back, as that practice doubled in size when doctors were doing what they should have been doing. You can see this happening in every aspect of our work. So those conflicts in what people do drive the relationship side of things. That leads to the conflict. It also means that in professional environments, we make a lot of distinction based on nuances, personality, because the competencies are hair's breadth differences. Thus, the way to approach this has to be more objective. So you start with those rules. You give me a ring, by the way. I'd be happy to talk to you about this in more depth, because I sense this is a beautiful question. A tough one, but fun to deal with. Very fun and very doable. Let me jump off this one. Niles, go ahead. You got another?
Yes. Yes. How does a shy person become a direct engagement leader?
It's intriguing that introverts, shy folks, may have an actual advantage in engagement. To the extent that they avoid contact, they have a liability. But the shy person doesn't tend to jump in and dominate the conversation initially. It tends to hold back and is more likely to gather information. The key to effective engagement isn't saying what you think, in spouting information. The key to engagement is asking the other party to share. So shy or introverted people are, in reality, most often more easy to get the point across that you lead through questions. You engage through questions. And the person who develops this repertoire of questions, these 7 engagement skill sets here are driven by questions. You become a diagnostician. The truth of the matter is you become Socrates. You lead through questions. Every one of these, the thing that's fascinating is 80%, 70-80% of the content of what those leaders do is diagnosis. Leaders are acquirers of information. Shy or introverted people have an edge in the sense that they're more likely to get it, that you lead through questions and listen. The extrovert has to really put the brakes on, a natural tendency to just talk, to just yak. And, well, this is what you probably want to know, and that may not be the issue at all. The same with physicians. Physicians who get themselves in trouble tend to be socially dominant types. Now, one would say, you're all laughing out there in healthcare, because you're saying they're all socially dominant types. Not necessarily. Some are more analytical, and some do come in more ready to question. Also, however, all clinicians and researchers in business, technical people, when you mention to them that this is the acquisition of information, those leaders tend to get it very, very quickly. Although I must tell you, the single most effective, well, not the single, but one of the most effective leaders I've ever met is the owner of a lumber yard who had an 8th grade education up in Quebec. And I must tell you, he just has learned, he approached life with such humility that he became the master questioner. And he's a virtuoso of gathering information and building empathy. So the introvert, take heart. You've got a great future as an engagement leader. You got another one, Niles? I'm sorry.
Yes, I do. Emmett. How do you initiate a direct engagement leadership program?
Well, oh boy, I love that question. Of course, call us, please. We would love to work with you to do this. It is a very rewarding activity and very efficient. It's a very efficient activity. So if you can, please come and meet with Niles and me. We're going to be in Chicago, Washington, and then we hope to be elsewhere as well, rolling that out further. But if you get a chance to come there, we'll try and make sure you get your dollar's worth. And the other way is look at formal programs that may deliver these things deliver the direct engagement skill set via the web. We're very much committed to trying to make that work and to work with you so that you're autonomous and can teach this yourselves. So please stay in touch with us regarding that. We'll be contacting you shortly. Any others?
No, actually, Emmett, I think that's all we have time for today.
Okay.
But I'd like to close, and please tell me if I'm going to be fading away, of course. But thanks for everyone for attending. Due to the lack of time, some of you may not have had the opportunity to present subjects that are unique to you. That unfortunately happens, in the time that we have. But since some of these issues are sometimes very sensitive, feel free to call Emmett or I to discuss these your specific issues after the webinar. If we had someone that called in or emailed in that was curious about the bullying product that we have or the bullying discussion that we have. Shift services, if you call in, the service is without charge, and our conversation will be held in strict confidence. Also, as a reminder, a hyperlink to download the slide presentation will be resent in a follow-up email that will also have information for you to listen to this program on an on-demand basis. Or you can provide this program to a colleague for their listening and review. This follow-up email and the on-demand video will be sent within 48 hours. If you do not receive this email, please check your spam folder or contact Emmett Murphy Leadership or Murphy Leadership directly. Our contact information is shown on the previous slide, Emmett. If you'd be so kind to go to the slide that has our contact information. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can go to our website, which is www.murphyleadership.com, and if you click on the About Us page, you'll be able to get this similar information. Also, as a reminder, at the close of this webinar, a window will appear for you to open a survey. We appreciate it if you would take a moment and complete the survey. Murphy Leadership was very excited to present this event and thank all of you for attending. We look forward to interacting with you in the future. Have a good day or evening wherever you may be. We look forward to our conversation. Please give us a call, no charge. And as we would say, the webinar is over. Thank you very much for attending.